Hey guys, welcome back to Reap Reel. And just like I say before getting into this, could you please like the post, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment with any stories you think that you'd like to hear me narrate or that you may want to share. And now we're back into this is episode 2 of How to Survive Camping. The story is titled How to Survive Camping, Rule number 4, The Dancers. I have run a private campsite. Every morning I take a four-wheeler out and circle the ground before most people are awake. There are some benefits to being an early riser: solitude, seeing the sunrise, finding the human torso lying in the middle of the road before anyone else. Yes, the torso, just the torso. This was back before smartphones. I was 21 and I had been in my last year of college, finishing up a business degree with a minor in horticulture. The campground was staffed in part by my extended family, but its ownership passed only to direct descendants. My life was planned out from birth, so my degree choice was deliberate. I believe my parents would have supported me, whatever I chose to major in, so long as I took ownership of the campground. But I've loved this place for my whole life, and I wanted to prepare myself to be the best steward I could. It was the start of the spring semester, when my mother forgot to close a window. My father woke in the middle of the night to find the little girl sitting in the mangled ruins of my mother's abdomen. Enraged, he seized the girl by her hair and dragged her out to the back door into the yard. She shrieked. She pleaded, but he couldn't be swayed. He threw her to the beast, and after it was all finished with her, it turned on him. The police found his head. That was really all they found. I know this is what happened because I dream of it. It was a true dream. If you've ever had a true dream, you know they feel different, and you know you can trust them. I never finished college. I regret that. Some days I don't need a degree to do my job, but I think it would have been nice to have. There's an empty spot on my office wall. My parents had cleared it before they died, so they could hang my diploma there, in preparation for when I took over management. I can't bring myself to put anything else up in this place. I was well prepared to take ownership of the camp, despite my age. I'd been training for it my whole life. After all, I had my entire extended family to help. So I found part of a body in the road I knew what to do. My flip phone coverage was limited, and I couldn't make calls whilst under the canopy of trees. Instead, I carried a digital camera and took photos from all the important angles the police wouldn't be interested in. Then I took out a large black trash bag from the back of my four-wheeler and edged the body in. I tried to shut it, put another bag around it, and then tied it again. Then I hoisted it onto the back of the vehicle and strapped it down. The blood was fresh enough that I could wash it off into the dirt with a couple of gallons of water I carried for this specific purpose. Now, I understand that some of you may be astonished that I was cleaning up the scene of a violent death without first contacting the police. However, my family has an understanding with the police. The campground is important around here. It brings a lot of people in during the peak of summer. We doubled the county's population. They spend a lot more money on local businesses, a lot of money. The police don't mind if we take certain liberties to ensure the normal operation of the campsite isn't disrupted. It would be upsetting to campers if they came across a dismembered body or active police scene. I called the police as soon as I was back in the house, and then I started calling family members. I'd only found the torso after all. That meant there were 2 legs, 2 arms, and a head yet to be found, and I had no idea how many pieces those parts were in. While my standing family scouts the woods for remaining bits, I could deal with the police. Officer Thomas responded. He'd been helping with our campsite difficulties since before I was born. He's close to retirement now. We sat in my office and looked through the photos I had taken on my computer, then requested the body out in the backyard. I pulled it off the four-wheeler and cut the plastic open mercifully. The body was still fresh, that it hadn't started to smell of decay, just a sour, meaty smell of early death. Officer Thomas inspected the severed sockets, picking the edges of flesh and muscle delicately with his fingers before sitting back on his haunches and stripping off his stained latex gloves. "This is different than the other cases," he finally said. I blinked, taken back, a sudden feeling of woeful inadequate to the challenge of my family's campsite. I know that this could happen someday, that I'd been the one to deal with something new moving in. But it was a distant sort of knowledge, the sort you decide to handle some other day and live in the blissful ignorance until the time comes. Like writing a will. We all know we should, but that's a problem we regulate for the future and try to ignore its spectre in our present lives. Thomas explained that the limbs were severed methodically. When we were dealing with a wild animal, whether natural or otherwise, the bodies would haphazardly torn apart. There'd be additional injuries of teeth or claw marks. The torso was otherwise untouched. There wasn't even bruising. This indicated that the victim hadn't been restrained, at least not by a method that left marks. The police might not be able to tell us what we were dealing with, but they could help narrow the possibilities. Thomas had brought the police van, so we put the body in the bag and tossed it in the back of the transport to the morgue. He asked that we bring the other parts by once we had found them, and then start trying to identify the victim. I would also check in with the other campers to find out if someone was missing, and perhaps any information about what they'd done or where they'd gone. Then Thomas would come back with some paperwork about a wild animal attack, and that would be done. We lose some campers, of course, once the rumours started to spread. That was unavoidable. Business would be slow for the next year, but it would bounce back once people began to forget that urgent sense of danger and slipped back into complacency. We hadn't formally acknowledged that this was an old land yet. The rules wouldn't come until later, when we had too many creatures that are intelligent or powerful enough to elude or attempt its removal. We found all the body parts by midday. They had been left deliberately, placed so that someone actively searching for them could find them. But the casual passer-by was unlikely to notice. My cousin found the head. She called me on the walkie-talkie, asking that I come look. Then she sounded deeply shaken. My cousin is 2 years older than me. I was quickly finding that having the camp manager title conveyed the perception that I was better equipped to handle anything, no matter how horrific. The head was placed on a stake in the centre of a narrow clearing. The ground was spongy, as it sat in a depression that collected water every time it rained. 4 more stakes were stabbed into the earth, in a circle around it. I pulled out my compass and checked their orientation. They set askew, from the cardinal directions. I found this was deliberate perversion. "Look," my cousin whispered, pointing at the head on the stake. "He's still alive." I edged closer, peering at the head. My skin crawled, and I felt goosebumps break out on my arms as I crossed the perimeter of the circle. A middle-aged man, perhaps in his 40s, his jaw was missing, leaving behind the upper row of teeth, and his eyes were wide and silent suffering. He blinked. I swore and stumbled backwards, rounded on my cousin, and told her to leave, to go, take a break, and recover, and then started going around asking camps if all their members were accounted for. I'd take care of it from here. Perhaps watching my parents die as a silent observer in a dream that felt like reality had prepared me for all this. I confess that it angers me to see someone die in a manner that no one should ever endure. But I've longer since accepted that this is my life. My world no longer has room for blissful illusion that humanity has no predators. I told the man on the stake that it would be okay, that I could put an end to this, and he'd finally, mercifully die. A couple of tears ran down his cheeks, and I saw relief in his eyes. Then I went to the stakes and pulled them free of the ground. After I'd wrenched the last one from the earth, I stood and watched the man's face. His eyes remained open, long past when he should have blinked. And I was satisfied that whatever ritual bond had him here had been disrupted. The air felt different as well, lighter. It no longer pressed in on me. I left the remaining detective work of identifying the victim to the police and the rest of my staff. I locked myself in the office. It was still odd, thinking of it as mine. The marks of my parents were still strewn everywhere, and I moved slowly in replacing their presence with my own. The books on folklore and camp management were worn, the bindings broken, the pages crumbled and smudged. I wondered how many times my father or mother had leafed through these searching for answers. Folklore is not a tidy thing. Monsters and creatures of power don't fall neatly into categories. It is not so different from the natural world in this regard. We can look at a bird and know it is a bird. What kind of bird is it? A bird of prey, or water bird, or woodpecker, or pigeon, or any other manner of many other types? Similarly, am I dealing with a spirit or demon, or a fairy, or a god, or something which falls into that grey area in between. And even if I could narrow it down, there are still variations within a category. If we're dealing with an incubus, is it one in the classic sense, or is it one of the kind that attaches only to one person for life? Or is it the kind with chicken legs from the knee down? Yes, chicken-footed incubi are a thing. No, we haven't had to deal with them yet on this campsite. I decided to try a couple of things. The use of a ritual made me suspect fairies, but the perversion of it also made me think spirits. I gathered up some deterrents from the shed: iron stakes, hawthorn branches, stones with holes in them, that sort of thing. Then I went about the campsite and left them strategically around, mostly at crossroads and along the edge of the designated camping areas. I erred. We were used to dealing with brute creatures that could be driven off, captured or killed. I don't regret my attempt. It is my responsibility to keep my campers safe. However, I am far more cautious now when I try to drive off something that is intelligent. They recognise the attempts for what they are and take offence at such aggression. That night I was woke by the sound of someone's voice outside my bedroom window. I'd at least cleared out the master bedroom and made it my own from my childhood bedroom. Had been torn and turned into a study after I left college. I didn't catch the word, for I come to awareness at the end of the conversation. Someone was talking to the little girl that cries outside my window. That made me sit straight up in my bed. Who or what would talk to the little girl? Her weeping stopped. There was a soft sound to her feet running on the grass, away from the house. Someone or something had sent the girl away. My heart began to hammer in my chest, and I quietly slipped out of bed, thinking of the shotgun I keep in the bedroom, wondering if it'd do anything at all. Then my house shook as something slammed against my front door and my back door in unison. A pause, another impact that rattled the doors in their frames, a third and final impact, and the crack and crash of both doors being torn off their hinges. I stumbled out of bed, blind with fear, thinking of how my father had died, how he had clawed with his bare hands at the beast's face, as if he could fight it off, even as its teeth severed his body into two. His hands closed over the shotgun's stock as footsteps echoed down the hallway. I stood, turned, and there was a hand against the shotgun barrel, pushing it up and away. And then there's another palm against my cheek. That's enough, a female voice says. She sounded amused. I couldn't see her face in the darkness of my bedroom. How about you go for a walk with us? I don't remember much after that. I left the house. I think I told them I couldn't not without the beast coming for me, and she laughed and says they'd sent it away. I'm not sure how many others were with us, Only the woman spoke to me. We walked into the forest, and I'm not certain of the route we took, for it comes and goes, as if I was slipping in and out of sleep. When my awareness returned, I found myself standing beside a lit campfire, in among a ring of people. The ground around me was packed earth, and the woman moved from person to person, a ceramic pitcher in her arms. She slipped a cupped hand inside and came up with a handful of water, which she dribbled on the brow of the person before her. Something felt wrong about this ritual, unsettling. I tried to move or speak, but I found my body was slow to respond to my desires. Finally, she stopped in front of me. "Why don't you join us?" she murmured, pouring the water on my brow. It ran down my face and neck and into the neckline of my nightgown. It felt gritty and tasted salty when the drop touched the edge of my lip. They began to dance, and I was compelled to join them. Step, turn, stretch your hands to the night sky. Spines arch, twist and bend, touch the ground, then up, hop. Then the music quickened, and I saw we spun, that the music came from behind a hunched group on the edge of the light. A violin, a hand drum, and something reminded me of a flute. We danced. My legs began to ache. My breathing grew laboured. Bright pain stabbed through my feet and ankles, and I thought madly that I felt liquid against my bare feet with every step. Still the dancers continued, their movements growing with more aggression and frenzy, and I wept and pleaded in broken, panicked fragments for them to release me. They did not. I collapsed before the music stopped. My chest heaved in spastic gasps, wrecking my entire body with convulsions, as it instinctively tried to bring in more oxygen to my battered body. My feet burned, pain shooting up my legs with every beat of my heart. I lay there withering in the dirt, whimpering, openly whimpering. The dancers clustered around my prone form. One of them crouched and felt my fingers in my hair, close to the roots, and she lifted my head from the ground, so that I was forced to look up at her. The firelight was to her back, and I could only see her chin and lips in the flickering light. "The little girl and the beast have laid calm to your life," she said. She smiled, her white teeth shining in the darkness. "None of us will contest their right, however. There is still so much we can do to you before you are succumbed." She leaned in close, and I felt her breath against my ear. Her body smelled of earth and plants. "Don't try to drive us off again," she whispered. She released me as the group, the dancers, and the musicians turned and walked away. I'm not sure how long I lay there, shuddering on the ground. It was one of my senior campers that found me. I heard his footsteps approaching at a run, and then he hit the ground next to me, turning me over onto my back. A flashlight shone in my face as I squeezed my eyes shut tight. "Thank God," he breathed. "You're alive." He didn't recognize me. That's not uncommon. I don't socialise with campers much. I was able to tell him not to call 911. That I was a camp manager and just wanting to go back to my house and rest. I could take care of myself from there, or call my aunt to come and help. He deposited me on the sofa in my living room and remained in my house until my aunt arrived. At one point he asked me what had happened. The dancers, I said weakly. The dancers found me. His attention focused on that, and he asked a few questions. Specific questions. Weird, he finally said, convinced we'd encountered the same people. I danced with them a few nights ago. I don't think I've ever felt so happy in my life. Even in my exhausted state, his words triggered a memory. Of something I'd read. Dancing is used as a cure for supernatural afflictions. The sick individual is sat down in the middle of a circle, and dancers move around them, thereby banishing their illness. Yet something felt wrong about their ritual. From the off-centered placement of the stakes to the mockery of the anointment. Were there a group of dancers that had been cursed? Were they demons enacting their own abnormality version of some ritual? Without being certain, I didn't try to drive them off again. However, I at least wanted to understand the difference and why one person had suffered and another had not. I could convey it to my campers somehow. I had not yet written my rules, but I had a vague idea that perhaps I could inform them so that they would know of the hazards. We were already spray painted the poison ivy patches, fluorescent pink. Telling people to stay away from the dancers wouldn't be too dissimilar in theory. When the wounds on my feet were healed enough that I could walk, I went into the forest after the sun had set. I wasn't concerned about the beast. It stayed close to the little girl, and the little girl never went into the forest. I drove about on my four-wheeler searching for campfires. There were many, but the later it got, the fewer remained to check. Finally, sometime after midnight, I found the dancers. They moved in slow, sinuous circle. Their movements were arranged to the music slow. Their shadows stretched out in the darkness beyond the orange glow of the campfire. I killed the engine and walked down through the thin line of trees to the clearing. The music stopped as I approached. The dancers turned to stare at me, and while I couldn't see their faces, I felt their hostility. The woman stepped out to meet me. She was short, I noticed, not even my height. She stood out from among the other dancers, tall and lean, and I wondered if there was a reason for that, or if it were mere coincidence. You should go, she said, evenly. You aren't welcome. I figured that much, I replied. I'm not ready to leave yet, though. Her hand snapped up. She grabbed me by the neck, raising her arm up, her fingers dragging into my tendons. What are you trying to do here? She hissed. I stood on my tiptoes, trying to ease the pressure on my throat. Finding out what prompts you to kill people. Her eyes went wide. She started to stare at me for a moment and then let go of my neck. I stumbled backwards, coughing. She laughed, a high, delicate sound, like a chime of a bell. You take advantage of your immunity from death, she said in amusement. I like your boldness. I will tell you, knowing that displeases us won't be enough to keep people from resisting the temptation of joining our dance. They had to be welcome, she said. Permitted to join, she would not elaborate on what sort of person they would welcome or who would be rejected. There wasn't any sort of criteria, she said, with a shrug. They just knew who they liked. As for the other offence, that would merit someone's death. She directed me to look at the musicians. I did. They raised their heads and looked back at me. My next memory of being on my knees, my fingernails stained with blood, and skin around my eyes and down the cheeks that burned from where I'd clawed it raw. The dancers were gone, and mercifully they'd taken the musicians as well. I don't leave the safety of my campers entirely up to themselves. I do what I can. Sometimes I take risks and sometimes I suffer for them. This is my responsibility as a camp manager. We do the hard and dangerous work to make sure everybody has a pleasant and safe camping experience. The least you can do is follow the directions that I have suffered to obtain. Rule number 4. If you see a group of people dancing in a circle around a fire, you may join them. If they welcome you in, dance with them until the music ends. Do not look at the musicians. If they do not welcome you, then instead stop and stare. Back away slowly and then leave. If they follow you, you can try to run, but it is likely already too late. Pray that death comes swiftly. Thanks for checking in again, guys. That's another story from The Fainting Goat. Hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please leave a like and do subscribe to the channel. And I'll be back soon with another installment.